the Supreme Court investigation.
Yeah.
As recently as like 5 or 6 days ago, they were like, we've narrowed it down. And they announced yesterday that apparently they're going to end the investigation without solving.
Yeah.
It's one way to narrow it.
Yeah. And from what it appears, this is who the investigation focused on. Temporary and permanent employees. Temporary being law clerks. Permanent employees being, I guess, like, sort of administrative people who had or may have had access to the draft opinion during the period from the initial circulation until the publication by Politico. Now, there's two things that seem to be absent from this, because one is that permanent employees do not include Supreme Court justices.
Right.
And the other thing that occurs to me is this draft opinion is being circulated. Like, who had it before the initial circulation? Right. It's also another question that's not that's not answered. But I mean, this is bullshit.
It is.
And and now that Emma's back,
yes,
I can say that he was right and my prediction was
to say.
Yes, that my prediction was when they find out that it was a conservative, that it came from Alito probably, if not him, somebody he authorized, then they're not gonna find who it was. And if they do, even if they did find out who it was, that person would be in the wilderness for about 6 months before they get to the Heritage Foundation and have a huge sinecure, and nobody thinks about it again.
And did you point out the fact that one of the two people responsible for the investigation is literally the successor to Sam Alito at the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey? Like, they work together?
Oh, well, that's a little surprising. I mean, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's there's a really funny bind that I guess Roberts and the court in general were in, and that funny bind is like, if you think of everything through the lens of protect the integrity of the court, but also protect the public legitimacy of the court, they couldn't do anything because you have to have a phony investigation to say we're investigating it, but you can't actually pin blame on a justice because that would severely damage the public perception of the court and the integrity of the court. So then as a result, you have to have a sham investigation that everyone knows is a sham. Because there's not really any way out of this. But yeah, I mean, it reminds me of, I don't know, we're getting more transparency just through the complete failure of these bullshit attempts at transparency. We're all just much clearer on how things actually work in these institutions now.
What is interesting about that is this investigation, most people in this country do not care, right, are not aware about it.
Right.
It made no, it's off the front pages already. Nobody's going to think about it. The whole point of this investigation anyways is for the legal institutions, and the legal institutions looking at this and going, this is bullshit. Mm-hmm. They all know it. And, there was a piece in the Atlantic just, I don't know, 4 days ago, talking about how the Supreme Court justices do not seem to be getting along. Like, which is, I don't know if people are aware of this. It's rare. They all are fairly elite. They're in a, and that
it was famous, like RBG vacationing with Scalia,
and Breyer making jokes with Thomas and blah blah blah. The last time there was anything like this was in the wake of Bush v. Gore. In fact, Newsweek was running an article about it the week that the planes hit the towers, and they pulled the article. I've heard differing things as to whether it was going to be on the and this is back when Newsweek actually meant something.
With a real magazine.
It was actually a real thing. With all due respects to people working on it now, but I'm just saying it was a different, it was like the network news was different then too. And they track it to Dobbs.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was the decision alone. I think they know who leaked this.
Yeah.
And so I think this has been a sham from the get-go. And, I think when we heard a month or two ago, was it Kagan or Sonia Sotomayor said, we're going to know who it is in like 2 months and we're going to announce it. That was her trying to make sure that the investigation was real.
Yeah.
By creating expectations that they could get to a solution here, because you knew you could you could find it because they know who did it.
Yeah.
They know who did it. And the question is like, how is this going to fester? Because the way, this is pretty obvious what goes on with this type of thing. They're like, we can't announce that it was Alito. They're not having a group meeting where they sit around saying this, but this is how it's being communicated between John Roberts and others. Like, it will undercut the institution too much at a key time where
and that's what they care primarily about across the aisle, right? Or across partisan lines on the court. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the iron law of institutions, right? Like, you don't want the institution to fail. And if you're a Supreme Court justice, that concept overall is more important than any given law, because you're talking about the foundation of our democracy. And frankly, I'm not sure that they're incorrect, but I also think there's a problem because there's the appearance and then there's the reality. And the reality is at one point you can not pay attention to the infrastructure of your house and it can look good from outside, but at one point there's going to be a major problem. And I think we are going to be heading towards that, because this is, I just don't see how, if you are Kagan and Sotomayor, this doesn't fester and make you angrier and angrier and angrier. Because let's be clear what that leak was about. That leak wasn't just here's a leak. That leak was a strategic leak, a tactic used to lock, either Kavanaugh or Coney Barrett presumably
and
into
undercut Kagan and Sotomayor directly in the case they were trying to build, essentially to
undercut Roberts. Undercut Roberts
too. Yeah.
Undercut Roberts, who was the one who was doing that. Sort of that or the negotiation. I think this is a big deal. I'm curious as what people in the legal institution are saying.
I think you can look at, you mentioned Kagan sort of, I think, trying to will a real investigation into being, or a real result into being. But she is a good bellwether for the most mainstream law institution attitude, and she's been wanted to be a sort of conciliatory, like, in the mold of the old liberal justices who could get along with all their colleagues, and she's been been speaking at law schools lately, saying stuff like, maybe it's less meaningful if we can watch baseball together if the institution itself is not functioning. Like, she's actually been delivering lines like that. And I think we're gonna talk about judiciary politics in New York in a minute, but I think one thing that's happening is like there's the polite fictions that sort of sustain these institutions are becoming harder and harder to keep up. And I think I've heard people who are in who are in law school saying stuff like, hey, for the first time ever, students in my class are coming into class saying the law isn't real, which is like not the kind of thing people who went into law school would go in and say before, right?
I got to be honest with you. My contracts professor refused to call me multiple times because he knew I was going to say that.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was 25 years ago. But I never became a lawyer. But yes,
Right.
I think like the veneer is coming off.
Yeah.
And I have yet to check in with my dad about this to see if
there's a generational divide. I'm doing my own lobbying efforts about the emperor having no clothes. So,
but the veneer is definitely coming off, and the question is and we're seeing it like the Hochul thing plays out in that way, and the question is like, are we going to see it on the federal level? Like Biden went to great lengths to protect the Supreme Court status quo. He appointed an entire commission that was going to look at like what needs to be done with the Supreme Court. And they came back and they said, maybe we should change the water cooler in the Supreme Court, or maybe, buy new chairs. They were like, nothing else, no structural change.
Have we tried respecting it more?
Exactly. Maybe the problem's with us, not with the court.
Maybe the problem is you're asking a lot of impertinent questions.
Exactly. And so, I mean, this is, I don't know. I think this is extraordinary. I mean, because this is, it's possible they all just go back to their corners and say like, okay, well, whatever, that's fine. Because it's also came out in the past couple of weeks, or I should say past couple of months, that Alito did this at least one time before.
Yeah, right.
In 2014 with the Hobby Lobby case, he leaked it to advocates who didn't want birth control to be dispensed by insurance. In a couple of weeks in advance so that they could prepare for it. But we also know in 2012, someone from his office probably spoke to the Wall Street Journal about Roberts going around and undercutting him in terms of what they wanted to do with the ACA when they wanted to strike that down. I mean, so this has been ongoing, and there's no reason to believe that Alito is going to stop. I mean, now he may not need to because the most controversial of cases has been essentially they weathered the storm and that's it. And then they've gone through it and now they're just going to go dismantle stuff. But this is, I don't know, this is effed up and nobody's going to care. I mean, not nobody, but nobody.
Nobody, most people are not going to care.
Well, it's hard to get across. It is. It's hard to get people to. It's hard to get across why it matters. But it's one of the reasons it's hard to get across why it matters is that the way that people, who care about the integrity of the court, the way they try to signal a red alert is by giving really, really boring talks where they hint that all is not well. No one, they're not I don't know. It seems like I think the conservatives and Alito are making they have made a bet that
you can't touch us.
Yeah, you can't touch us, right? And especially like we have you right where you want you, because if you care so much about the integrity of the court, then you can't touch us. Touching us attacks the integrity of the court.
We are the court. I am the Senate. Right? I mean, that's really what it is, right? And he's hiding behind that. He is the institution, so you can't attack the institution.
Can't attack him. Yeah.
This is like the debt ceiling.
Yeah.
In somewhat respects, it's sort of like this. The debt ceiling thing. It's sort of like we've got the country held hostage, and so what are you going to do on some level? And I guess the only there's going to be two things to watch. It seems to me. Because Joe Biden will not say anything about this at all. It's the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. Mm-hmm. Dick Durbin is no Dianne Feinstein, but he's not much else either, frankly. I mean, he's pretty mealy when it comes to this. Mm-hmm. It's really just a question of how hard, let's say, White House pushes. Yeah. Sheldon Whitehouse. In terms of whether this gets any type of hearing.
White House might actually try.
I would be surprised if he doesn't go hard at this.
Right.
In the House, it's going to be interesting because a couple of days ago, the Republicans were talking about, we need to have hearings on this leaker.
Yeah. I think they should.
And, oh, no,
Right?
I would love them to have hearings on this leaker, but I'm starting to think like this might be one of those things like, oh yeah, we forgot to get around to that, because they're going to get the message that we don't want this to come out.
Yeah, right. Right.
I mean, they were saying that Trump was saying that, the Supreme Court leaker should be jailed, right? I mean, or at least Republicans were saying
Gotta be
that.
tough.
Yeah.
Got to be tough, but they're not. So those are the two things to look at the judiciary in both those, both in the Senate and in the House. But outside of that, then I guess it's just like, how many sort of like legal institutionalists will start to sort of like give up the ghost and stop pretending. I don't know. You would think we would already pass that point, but